So we talked about how the Republic came to be, but now let's talk about what does it look like. It's very different from the Athenian direct democracy. Remember, this is a representative democracy. So now let's talk about who are the representatives and what role do they play. Their executives basically are called two consuls. Consuls literally means those who walk together. So the purpose of having two consuls rather than one is basically that you don't want to give too much power to one person. These guys are elected by the Centuriate Assembly, who we'll find out later are basically the soldiers. They only serve for 1 year, which is interesting. We'll come back to that. They are commanders-in-chief of the military, much like our presidents. Now let's go back to that serving for 1 year. The fact that they said, okay, you can only serve for 1 year, we can see that they're trying to limit their power. They did not want another king. Remember, they swore that they would never have another king. So they're being really cautious here about how much power they want to give these consuls. They didn't appoint one, they appointed two because they didn't want a king. And they're only going to let them serve for 1 year. Now this is good because, you know, it's not giving too much power, but it's bad in that it doesn't give very much consistency. Another interesting thing about Rome is they understood that democracy isn't really make quick decisions. You have to move fast. And so they actually said that during a time of crisis we can get rid of democracy and we can appoint a dictator for 6 months, and then that dictator... Okay, these were 300 people chosen from the patricians. Now remember, the patricians are the rich. Unlike the consuls, they serve for life. So they were thinking this is going to give them stability. But this causes problems as well, because if I'm a senator and I know that I'm going to serve for life, I'm going to forget about those little plebeians. I'm just going to worry about the patricians. So the Senate, basically, they'll say what they need to get elected, or they'll do what they need to do to get elected. And then once into the Senate, they just do whatever they want for them. And again, they make laws, and they'll also advise the consuls. Okay, now we already mentioned the Centuriate Assembly. These are the guys that elect the consuls. These are made up of any citizen soldier. So basically, if you're in the Centuriate Assembly, you're a soldier, and you get to pick your boss. Because remember, you're electing the consuls who will become the commanders-in-chief over the military. So this is kind of nice. You get to pick your boss, basically. Then we also have the tribal assembly, and the only thing that the tribal assembly is you're taking citizens and you're grouping them together according to where they live. So again, I hope you see a pattern here. Assembly are just people that get together and vote for representatives. These guys also serve for life, and these are the people that will elect the tribunes. We haven't gotten to the tribunes yet. If you look at this this coin, here's actually a citizen casting a vote. If you can see that in his hand, he's getting ready to drop it into the ballot box. Okay, so the tribal assembly elects a tribune. So who are the tribunes? Well, here if we look at this picture, we see the bully, and then we see the guy getting picked on, right? I want you to picture the bully as the Senate, and I want you to picture the guy getting picked on as the plebeians. So basically, the Senate is doing whatever it wants to begin with, and they just push the plebeians around, and the plebeians can't do anything. So what happens is they start electing what's called tribunes. And it's a tribune's job to break up the fight, to make sure that the Senate plays fair. And they actually have a lot of power. A tribune can actually veto a law if they don't like it, meaning if the Senate passes a law or votes to approve a law, they can get rid of that law by vetoing it. Tribune or tribune, you might be familiar with that word because lots of newspapers are called tribunes. Most famously the Chicago Tribune. But there's also the Salt Lake Tribune just to the south of us. Now the question is, why would you name your newspapers after these guys? Well, think of what a newspaper does. A newspaper's job is to protect the little guy, right? Newspapers were not created to help the rich. The newspapers were created to help the poor. And think about that. It doesn't cost much to get a paper. Anyone can afford a paper. And what the papers will do is they'll make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do, and if they don't, they'll try to stop them by letting people know. Okay, also, in order to help out the plebeians, is they wrote down the laws, basically their constitution, on 12 tables. Literally carved them in stone. And then they hung them in the Forum. This right here, here's a picture of what the Forum looks like today. Basically, it's in ruins. But the Forum used to be the place where you would go to see the Senate, or that's the center in the city. That's where the Senate would meet, and eventually the emperors would. Some of these words are probably familiar to you. Okay, when our founding fathers were creating our government, we copied a lot of what Rome did, but we saw some of the things that they were doing that we didn't like, and we changed it. So keep that in mind. Anytime that we change something, it's because we didn't like what happened in Rome because of it. So let's start with the executive. They have 2 consuls. We have a president, and we've got a junior president, right? A vice president. Their consuls serve for 1 year. We didn't like that, so we upped that to 4 years. And then everything else is the same. In our Senate is a little more complicated. They have 300 members, or 300 senators. They serve for life. Ours serve for 6 years, which is longer than a president, but not life. We don't want them to serve for life. They do some of the same things. They both make laws. They both advise the executive, or the consuls, or the president. We also have the House of Representatives, where they serve for 2 years, and they make some laws as well. They have the 12 tables, and we have our Constitution. But basically, they do the same thing. So I hope you see that when we were making our government, we basically copied the Romans.
In 1776, a group of British colonists declared independence from Great Britain. These men, farmers and lawyers, set out to create a new nation. They dreamed of a nation that gave citizens the right to choose their leaders. A nation in which the leaders represented the citizens. A representational government like they envisioned had existed 2,000 years earlier in an ancient city far away.
In designing the Constitution of these United States of America, we have at various times sought precedent in the history of that ancient republic and endeavored to draw lessons both from its leading ideas and from the tumult and factions which finally brought it low. Thomas Jefferson.